Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to give people a couple minutes to join, people jumping on as we speak. So I will get us started at maybe we'll say 4:02. Thanks everyone for jumping on. We're just going to give it a couple minutes to let folks join. Looks like may have slowed down a little bit. So I said 4:02, but I think we could probably get going now. Welcome to our Colorado Water Plan listening session on vibrant communities. My name is Kat Weissmiller. I'm the Deputy Section Chief for Water Supply Planning at CWCB. And I'm really glad that you are all able to jump on today. I want to start off with mentioning that today we have some live language interpretation. I'm going to turn it over in just a moment here to B. Torres from Community Language Cooperative, who will be explaining the way that our language interpretation will be working today. So take it away, B.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is B. Torres. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I will be your Spanish interpreter this afternoon. Thank you all for your commitment to language justice. Language justice means that we all have the right to speak and be heard in the language of our hearts. Therefore, I will provide simultaneous interpretation during today's meeting. Once I finish speaking, we will activate that interpretation function, and at that time, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, next to your apps and reactions button, you will see a globe icon. Please click on that icon and select either English or Spanish as the language of your heart. If you are fully bilingual in both languages, you do not need to select a language. I do want to remind folks to please speak at a conversational pace so that I'm able to interpret your message accurately. Should you have any technical issues with interpretation, please don't hesitate to type in the chat and we'll do our best to troubleshoot as we go. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es B. Torres y mi pronombre es ella, y les agradezco muchísimo su compromiso a la justicia del lenguaje, lo cual significa que todas las personas tenemos el derecho de hablar y ser escuchadas en el idioma de nuestro corazón. Entonces yo interpretaré esta reunión simultáneamente. En un momento vamos a activar esa función de interpretación y en ese momento, en la parte inferior de su pantalla de Zoom, al lado de su botón de reacciones, usted va a ver un icono de globo terráqueo. Favor de hacer clic en ese icono y elija el idioma de su corazón. Si usted es completamente bilingüe en ambos idiomas, no es necesario elegir alguno. Les recuerdo que por favor hablen a un ritmo de conversación para poder brindar una interpretación precisa de su mensaje. Si acaso tienen problemas técnicos con la interpretación, por favor no dude de escribir en el chat a todo el grupo y podemos arreglarlo mientras seguimos con la reunión. Muchas gracias y ya podemos comenzar. Thank you very much. We can activate that interpretation function now.
All right, that should be activated. Okay, I see the thumbs up. I think that means that it's working well. Okay, good. All right, thanks everyone. As you may already know, we're hosting 4 listening sessions as part of our public comment period for the Colorado Water Plan. The first 2, Thriving Watersheds and Resilient Planning, have already occurred. Those were on July 27th and August 10th. And then of course, today is Vibrant Communities, and we're really grateful that you all took the time today to join us. And then looking forward, on September 28th, we'll be hosting another session on robust agriculture. The sessions are all dedicated to each action area of the plan, but of course, we are happy to entertain questions and conversation about all action areas in the plan at any of the sessions. So feel free to ask questions as they come up for you. With that, I'm going to turn it over shortly to Stacy Bowe with Strategic by Nature. and she will be walking us through the plan for the rest of the session. And this is just our overall agenda, but she will walk us through some of the goals and the intent for today.
Great, thanks, Kat. So we're going to try and breeze through most of this because we really want to dedicate most of the session to hearing from all of you. But I want to, back one more slide back, please. I want to take a minute to, we're breezing too fast, to talk through the overall purpose for today and our agreement. So like Kat said, we're here to listen to all of you. The goal of this listening session is to provide the public with an opportunity to directly communicate with the CWCB staff and directors that may be present tonight. I see numerous CWCB staff on the line, so they're here and listening and are eager to hear what you all have to say. Another goal is to provide an accessible and virtual forum for communities across Colorado to listen to public comments and hear from each other as well. We all know that that always sparks ideas and additional thoughts. So it's really great that everyone's here together. It provides us a different kind of venue to submit comments beyond just going to the Engage CWCB website. And then we also want to provide access to the specialists in the focus areas of the water plan to help address questions if they're able to be addressed. But one thing to note is that CWCB is gonna, as we've done in the last couple of listening sessions, address questions that they can. And mostly they're here to listen, and the deep dive reflection of what they're hearing tonight is gonna show up in the summary of input and responses after the public comment period ends, so that they can continue to gather input throughout the whole comment period. So today's focus is vibrant communities, and like Kat said, we don't need to entirely focus on this, but we're just trying to, you know, bite this elephant one at a time so that we can really get valuable feedback from people. But if you're only able to be at this listening session and you want to comment about a past or future topic, that's totally fine. Next slide, please. So our meeting agreements, our goals here are really to equalize participation, and you'll see that in our protocols for our queue, our question and comment queue. And this goes without saying, but respect, we want to see that in both words and meeting conduct from everybody here. And like I just said, focus on our goals today, the content at hand. This is the Colorado Water Plan listening session. So we're going to make sure our comments are focused and relevant to the Colorado Water Plan. And another piece is just to step up and step back. We really encourage you all to participate and be concise and to the point. We have a time limit so that we can get everybody's voice heard tonight. But also, if you keep finding yourself in the queue, it might be nice to take a step back and let some other people be in the queue as well. However, I'll also say that we've had comments really great at the beginning of these listening sessions, and then they've tailed off toward the middle, and we try and keep these sessions open as long as possible in case people need to pop on late. But so we might have time for extra comments from people as we go. And also, if you do know of somebody that's supposed to be here or coming late, let us know, or also let them know when comments are trailing off, so we can make sure that we are here for everybody that wants to comment tonight. And we'll try and keep this line open as long as we can through the 6 p.m. time. Our Zoom protocols is we're going to have everybody muted. Please be monitoring the chat box. There'll be important information in there in terms of our queue and instructions. And also you can see all the CWCB staff introducing themselves. If you are on the phone, *6 is how you mute and unmute. We will have videos spotlighted when you're speaking. So if you can turn your video on while you're talking, that would be really great. And we are recording this if you did not get that pop-up message. And we will be doing a 4-minute timer on our question queue. And I'll go into the details of the queue. We're going to put those instructions in the chat box, and I'll go into those details before we kick off. But we're going to have Russ give us a little overview first. But if you do know now that you'd like to submit a comment, you can enter your name and affiliation into the chat box, and we'll get you in the queue. We will not be using the raise hand function tonight. Only the CWCB staff, if they have a comment or response, will use that raise hand feature. Everybody else will write your name and affiliation in the chat. Unless you're on the phone, we'll give you a prompt and you can indicate that you'd like to speak if you're calling in as well. So with that, I will turn it over, I think, next slide, please, to Russ, and then we'll go from there. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacy and Kat. Welcome, everybody. And again, yeah, this is our third of 4 listening sessions through the public comment period. And I'm excited to have you join us. We're about 2/3 of the way through public comment period. And in addition to having these listening sessions virtually, we're also kind of making our way around the state. And we're about 2/3 of the way through, I think, all the counties in the state. So we're doing our best to kind of get around, and just thought that having some virtual sessions like this also kind of increased the accessibility for those that maybe couldn't catch us when we're out and about or at other meetings. So I'll give you a quick overview of the water plan, and like to start off with just a little bit about CWCB. So the Colorado Water Conservation Board is a policy agency. We don't regulate. There are many agencies and groups we do work with, including some of those that regulate. But another important feature is we do a lot with funding. We fund a lot of projects across the state, a lot of water projects, but we don't build the projects ourselves generally. This is something that we work with local groups to kind of help enact. And again, that's something that we can support with funding. The first Colorado Water Plan came out in 2015, and this is the very first update to that. It was always billed as a living document. And so true to that, we kind of hit pause at intervals in between, and I'll kind of speak through kind of looking at various pieces of this, some of that, the data, and then ultimately updating the plan itself. Just kind of to highlight that point of where we're at in the order of things. If you look at all of the government agencies, we are, and you look and you squint really hard, you might be able to make out that Department of Natural Resources in that bottom tier down there in the bottom section, and then the Colorado Water Conservation Board beneath it. Point being that there are about something on, close to 200 agencies across the state, and we're one of many. That doesn't need to constrain us, as Russ George, one of kind of drivers of a lot of kind of grandfather of a lot of the water legislation that we have, and driving force still says, consensus can move mountains. And so a lot of the power of the water plan is bringing people together and helping kind of focus on what are those key issues that we need to focus on. And as Chairman Hart says from Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, that change really ultimately comes from people. So as an agency, what we can do is, we're good at convening and collaborating groups, as evidenced by tonight. We fund, again, a lot of projects, and we can really lead and kind of focus attention on some of those critical water issues in the state. A lot of the work that we do is in that kind of support space, whether that's research or developing tools. And so there's a lot of flavor of that in the water plan too. So kind of speaking to the iterative planning, we're talking a lot about the water plan now, but this is one of several steps along the way. So, I would actually say the roots of the water plan go back really to probably 2002, 2003, when we had a pretty extreme drought at the time, and what was at the time the largest fire in the state, the Hayman Fire. That really captured a lot of attention and was kind of critical to kicking off a lot of the legislation we had that ultimately fed into the water plan. So by the time the water plan came out, we had several planning documents before that were kind of these iterative technical looks at the future water needs that we had in the state, which we sometimes frame up as a gap, a future water need that may be more than what we are able to supply today. So in 2015, a lot of that rolled up into the development of the water plan itself. And we got famously or infamously maybe 30,000 comments, but it's really never stopped. We've just kept going along the way. So we've had subsequent updates. That first statewide water supply initiative, you may be familiar with that term. If you've been around for a while, that was kind of rebranded as the analysis and technical update to the Colorado Water Plan in 2019. And that really is the underpinning data that feeds into the water plan. We delivered that to the Basin Roundtable. So some of that founding legislation that came out of 2002 drought, in 2005, we had the Water for the 21st Century Act that created these grassroots basin roundtables across the state. And we work with many groups across Colorado, but those roundtables are certainly a key stakeholder group that help kind of give us feedback on what's happening at the local level, where are the critical issues, where are the major project needs. And so roundtables play a pivotal role in the basin implementation plans that they collectively work to create, give a flavor of what those local issues, challenges are, potential solution sets, and identified projects. Many times by kind of putting out a public call and trying to bring others into those groups. So those basin implementation plans were just completed at the top of 22. I think we had the finals in January. And then all of that kind of feeding into the water plan. And as you're seeing along the bottom here, we have these iterable, kind of iterative steps along the way that we work with stakeholders and continue to get input. So, the water plan is really a roll up of all of that great feedback along the way. And I will note that one of the things noted there in the process, we kind of interrupted our process this time on the front end of the water plan before we even started drafting to get more feedback from stakeholders. That resulted in about 1,200 comments and 200 pages of notes on a document that's now about 248 pages. So we had good source material to start with. The underpinnings of the water plan are the same underpinnings as before. The three main values that were in the 2015 plan: a productive economy that supports vibrant, sustainable cities, agriculture, recreation, and tourism, an efficient, effective water infrastructure system, and a strong environment with healthy watersheds, rivers, and streams and wildlife. Also in 2015, there was this kind of, we called it, sometimes referred to it as the hidden value or this extra value. It was a sentence that kind of immediately followed these three values that really spoke to those issues in 2002 and 3 that had really kicked off a lot of this work. So this kind of spirit of resilience was always a value in the water plan. And we tried to codify that in this plan by just owning this fourth value on the surface and really borrowing from Department of Local Affairs definition that went through a public comment period. But really creating an informed public with creative forward-thinking solutions that are sustainable and resilient to changing conditions, result in strong, equitable communities that can adapt to and thrive in the face of adversity. So these 4 values underpin the water plan. And as we started to write and say, well, how do we think about the water plan? It was an important question that came to us. Well, what is a water plan? And it's a good question. And we had to take a step back, I think, and think about that too, because when the first water plan was written, I think there was a lot of focus. You're trying to kind of throw everything in there about water in the state. But over the years, what we've seen is those questions, really every question about where are we at on the water plan, or how are things progressing with the water plan, come to our agency specifically. So while we, again, can move mountains through consensus building, work with our partner agencies, we really had to kind of own that the water plan works on 2 levels. So on a very high level, it is this biggest megaphone that we perhaps have in the water world to highlight a range of issues around water management in the state, to set the stage for collaborating and how it can be more resilient and mitigate those future risks. It shines a light on all these critical water issues in the state. But at a more simple level, it's really a strategy document for CWCB. And so as we've kind of walked that line between the two, we've really broken the water plan into a set of 50 actions that are the examples of local water projects. They're project level examples of the kind of work that you could do. And there's many flavors of that. This is really framed up around grant making. So thinking about the 5 areas of water plan grants that the legislature created after the first water plan came out, we kind of frame up these project level examples that would be supported through those grant efforts. And they're pretty broad in scope. They certainly aren't meant to feel limiting. Really, there could be limitless number of partner actions out there, but we try to kind of give a broad range that kind of marry to these buckets of water plan grant funding of the kind of good work we know we need to see in the state that our water plan grants can support. And then there are 50 agency actions. So agency actions are the things that we're going to do. They're the things that CWCB specifically are committing to. And in many cases with partner, or I should say collaborating agencies that we work with that are helping us, kind of work through these actions. In some cases they're helping lead, in some cases they're supporting, and those are defined in the plan too. So all of this is kind of folded into chapter 6 of the water plan. The 4 areas of the water plan, when the first water plan kind of had a little bit, I kind of affectionately call it the Wheel of Fortune, but it was this bigger list of things that we've kind of just simplified into these 4 areas of vibrant communities, robust agriculture, thriving watersheds, resilient planning, understanding that all of these are interconnected and really intertwined in ways that it's impossible to separate. So when we think about vibrant communities, we're talking about all things really municipal water use for, from our biggest metropolitan areas to our smallest rural towns, understanding that some of those may be very ag-centric towns. But this is the place that we really talk about municipal industrial water use. On robust agriculture, that's the area that we're talking about local foods or food and fiber. You hear a lot. Our orchards, our farms, our ranches. In the Rio Grande, we're talking about our acequias, our ditch companies. In thriving watersheds, we're talking about that place for larger watershed health, and beneath that, forest health specifically, our rivers and streams, how we protect those aquatic species. And then resilient planning is this kind of specific carve out to really talk about this need for increased resilience in the future, noting that we have pretty big impacts from climate change, and how we're going to meet those challenges is critically important for people to understand and for us to identify ways that not just to highlight the problems, but possible solution sets. What are those ways that we can be adaptive, supportive as government, whether that's through supporting education and outreach, or whether that's through supporting funding. So again, all these areas are very connected. And I would say, the topic that we're talking about tonight is vibrant communities that we're specifically honing in on, as Stacy and Kat both noted. Happy to get comments on anything if you couldn't make one of the other meetings and you wanted to talk about that. But when we think about vibrant communities, it's really emblematic of all these areas. We have cities with river corridors running through them. We're very connected to our watersheds. We have to think about water quality in our cities and water access issues. We think about storage for cities, and recognize that storage is important, whether we're talking about green infrastructure, gray storage, gray infrastructure, or we're thinking about how we, work within our watershed. So, alternative kind of sources of storage. Certainly, we're thinking a lot about water conservation and all the kind of pieces wrapped up in that I'll touch on here in a minute. But the point is, this is very broad in reach. If we're thinking about our cities and where we get our local foods, we're inherently talking about agriculture and recognizing that we have inherent need to kind of look at these things holistically. So we are making sure that we protect our farms, and we're getting, keeping those sources of local foods, that we're thinking about how we protect our watersheds, and we're thinking about ways to work with our river corridors and protect stream health. So in each of these action areas, we have a vision, and these visions really kind of set, a picture of where we need to be in the future and how we're going to get there in 2050. What are the things that we need to be focused on? Where do we want to go? Not looking at just where we're at, where we want to go. And I think inherent in this vision, and kind of speaking to this first sentence, I won't read this whole piece, but I'll leave it up here. But this concept of holistic water management, we do recognize is essential for our future. And how we grow as cities is a piece of that. And some of that, relies on things that are in some ways outside of the water plan. We think about development and housing and just how cities, grow. What are, we think about green building codes and things like that. That's not necessarily something that's in the water plan, but is a big piece of this. So setting that vision to make water part of that dialogue is critical. And then of course, outdoor, we're thinking about land use codes, and some of that has impacts too, just on the development scene, but thinking about not just water conservation, but one water thought. So thinking about water conservation, storm, black water, gray water, how water moves across the landscape, how we can utilize stormwater more effectively. All of these things are kind of bound up into this vision that we're setting for the future, recognizing that we really need to embrace beyond conservation, but water conservation plus, really a one water ethic for how we develop. One piece I'll highlight here that we call out specifically in one of our actions is a focus on transformative landscape change, and just recognizing that it's very clear, especially as things get warmer, that our landscapes and what we can, the water that we have, the water that we're putting on the ground really needs to be that, highest value, the right kind of vegetation, we're keeping trees healthy, but that we're not just wastefully using water on non-essential turf grasses or in areas that it just doesn't make sense to be irrigating. So that focus, and I know you've probably heard a lot about the turf bill that came out. I mean, that is a focus that will be coming to our agency and our group specifically to run that concept, that idea of just, again, wise land use is certainly embedded in this water plan and in this vision. And there's a big need. So as we think about our future, and I highlight this just because we've gotten questions on it, when we look at total municipal demands in the future, we see that they're pretty big. Not all of those demands ultimately are utilized by the city. Some of that water is returning to stream. That could be through water loss. It could be after the water is treated and it's going back to the stream. So you've got these two graphs in there, but our cities, certainly use a lot of water. Ultimately, it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 7% of total use in the state. But we obviously have a role to play in water conservation. How we use that water most effectively and most efficiently is clearly at the forefront of a lot of our discussions. And this is kind of a rough graph that shows that. One thing that we did, and it's kind of spoken to in the original water plan, is we laid out these scenarios. So this is these kind of bookends of the future. What's a high, medium, kind of low as we look out, what's our future possible need for water use. And so in these upper scenarios, we see that we have kind of some of the larger need, especially in that scenario E, so our hot growth scenario, where there's up to a 740,000 acre foot gap each year by 2050. That's a big number. And of course, it is exacerbated if we have things like compact issues, or if we have things like failing infrastructure. I mean, it's predicated on the system we have, but either way, our solution sets to meet these are very similar. And in those upper scenarios, some of the strongest drivers are really population and climate change. So in that top scenario, you're seeing 4.2 degree warming. That's additional warming potential by 2050. There's a lot of climate kind of embedded into the water plan with a range of 2 to 5 degrees warmer by 2050 potentially. We also see our highest population growth in that scenario. But then in that next scenario down, and it kind of reminds me of this Brad Udall quote that climate change is water change, but there's hope, and we do have tools in place to work to mitigate these worst impacts, right? So we have in that second scenario from the last, in scenario D, 4.2 degrees warming, same highest population growth, but we have an embedded 10% reduction in water conservation, both for municipal and agricultural uses. And we see that makes about a 300,000 acre foot per year reduction in our needs, in our future needs. So conservation is a huge part of what we need to continue to focus on. It's not a silver bullet. We can't conserve our way out. We need to be thinking about all the things: storage, water conservation, how we use our watersheds. Everything that's in the water plan is all on the table and all needs to be thought of holistically and brought together for our success. But the point is, there's hope and we can do it. Brad Udall also says you can't depress people into action. And I think our goal with the water plan is to paint an honest picture where we're at, but also provide the tools that we really need your help to do to kind of implement the projects that are going to make the most sense for Colorado in the future. Understanding that we're a local control state, a lot of that good work, that magic happens at the local level. So as you're here tonight to make comments, you can go online and make comments through our survey on Engage CWCB. By all means, if there's something we could say better, we've missed, tell us. We want to hear that. We need to hear that. And if you've done an amazing project that we need to hear about too, that's great. There's a place on Engage CWCB to share your story. But far above the 30,000 comment mark, what I would love to see is 30,000 actions. It's been said before, but the water plan is just a plan if it sits on a shelf. It gets implemented and we do this together. And a lot of that, and the ways that quite often we can innovate, is through our partner action, the work that you do when you come in for a grant or you take other actions. So here's some flavors of that. Practice personal conservation. Water conservation is key. We have nothing but to gain from more people understanding where their water comes from, water issues, using water wisely. Where you can, if you have more capacity and time like you're doing tonight, get involved in local water issues. Work with, whether it's roundtables or your local utility or city or NGOs. Get involved in issues, especially because many impacts on water roll out at the local level and have biggest impacts at that local level. And then if you have a great idea for a project and something that fits within those water plan grants, or maybe through some of the other grant programs that are offered, not even just through CWCB, but other programs across the state, get a grant. We'd love to see new innovative projects coming in. And right now we kind of have unprecedented funding levels to make those projects happen. On the personal water conservation side, I will just highlight, we have good friends and partners in Water Education Colorado, and the Water 22 initiative is really kind of highlighting a range of things that you can do on the personal conservation space. There's a pledge for that, both in Spanish and English as well. So feel free to take that, but go online, share your story, make a comment, but by all means, please help us by making a commitment. And with that, I think I'll turn things back over to you, Stacy, and we can open it up for comments.
Great, thank you, Russ. So our protocol for our comments is going to be that if you're interested in making a comment or asking a question, write your name and affiliation in the chat box, and we'll keep track of who is up next and who's on deck. If you're calling in on a phone, you will select *9 on your keypad to be able to let us know that you'd like to make a comment. We're going to refrain from using the raise your hand action, and we'll keep that for staff to use if they want to make the response. We will spotlight you when you're speaking, so please have your video on if possible. Additionally, as B, our interpreter, noted earlier, please remember to keep a conversational pace or speed with your comment so that she can keep up and make sure to interpret. We will have a timer going. Jeff's little video is highlighted right now, and the timer will pop up when your time starts. You'll have 4 minutes to make your comments, and you'll see the timer counting down, so you can self-monitor that. And if you don't see it, I will politely let you know when your time is up. You're welcome to get back in the queue if you'd like, and we will keep the session open to make sure we hear everybody. We'll conclude at 6. And there's another listening session, and there's also alternative ways to submit comments if you don't feel like commenting tonight and just want to listen. So with that, we'll get everyone's names in the chat that would like to comment. And first, we will start with Walter Sharp. Go ahead.
Thank you all for allowing me to speak. I'm not able to see my picture, so hopefully I'm in screen. I'm curious as to where source water conservation is in the mix of the water plan as far as evaporation reduction. I know that we might lose 4 acre feet a year on certain reservoirs per acre, and I was curious as to where in the water plan, if it's addressed for source water conservation, and then on the grant opportunities, if there is any programs available to either do feasibility studies or to determine the actual evaporation rate reductions by installing floating solar on open water bodies within Colorado. I know that the National Renewable Energy Lab did a study that I assisted with to determine the capacity in the state of Colorado to support floating solar. And we estimate that it reduces evaporation by 50%. Granted, that's nowhere near 790,000 acre feet per year, but every acre feet can be beneficial. And so that's all I have at this moment in time. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much. If any staff would like to respond or anything, you're welcome to jump in.
I'll just quickly say, and Walter, happy to follow up with anything if you want to shoot an email with any specific questions. But yeah, absolutely, evaporation is something we have to consider moving forward. We can't cover everything, but there are certainly opportunities, and you've hit on one. I don't know that we've seen a ton, and we're actually just digging into this recently of solid kind of findings off of, at least I know we installed our first floating solar actually up in Walden, and was recently kind of following up on that. We worked with NREL. I'm not sure that we saw maybe the bigger numbers that you were pointing out in terms of evaporative loss or evaporative reductions, but certainly I imagine there is some, and I'm eager to see if there are more opportunities there. So I think it's a really good comment and point well taken. Certainly is part of something we need to consider for the future.
Thank you, Russ. I appreciate you showing me who was talking, because I wasn't sure who you were and until you showed up. And so, yes, I was involved in instigating the Walden project, and I go up there biannually. That's every twice a year, right? Not not every 2 years, to check on it and do the spring and winter maintenance, and to make sure the health is okay. And I monitor it regularly from a weather standpoint, watching it get frozen in minus 30-degree weather all the time.
Thank you so much. All right, we will open up for additional comments. If you have a comment, please write your name and affiliation in the chat. That helps us keep track of who is commenting. And we'll just hang out unless Russ or any other staff want to say anything else while we're waiting for additional people to pop into the queue. Okay, we have a taker. So Dawn, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Hi, guys. It feels very awkward to know that there's somebody trying to interpret, because I am a fast speaker. So I apologize. I will try to slow down. You guys all know me. I wanted to make a brief comment on the tone of the general plan. City of Aurora, third largest municipal provider in the state of Colorado. Of course, we are looking through the water plan. We are going to be putting through our comments, and many of us at the city have been reviewing the plan. And so one of the things we're running into is we feel the general tone of the plan is slightly negative and pejorative towards cities and municipalities. Just a couple of examples for you. In section 3.21, there is a comment regarding the municipal gap, which ends by saying, despite efforts to conserve water. And the wording here implies that conservation is for naught, without expressing that this gap can be partially mitigated through conservation. Another example in section 4-51, the plan mentions municipal aquifer storage and recovery, ASR, as a promising strategy, but that there are many complications that need to be overcome. And this statement comes off as a bit anti-ASR. ASR is going to be a necessary source of water for the public, and a more positive tone here would be beneficial. Municipalities and cities are currently implementing and planning a lot of great work and projects to ensure that citizens have clean water, while highlighting negatives of current and future planning projects to ensure, or is necessary to understand where improvements need to be made. The plan does also need to highlight the significant conservation and reuse efforts and current projects that municipalities are implementing to ensure its citizens have clean water now and in the future. And we would appreciate a more positive tone throughout the plan so the public realizes that cities have been proactively and aggressively planning for sustainability and will continue to plan for Colorado's water security. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Can you also just explain what ASR stands for the benefit of other people that may not be familiar with that term?
Yep, aquifer storage and recovery. That is the concept of storing water underground and then pulling it back out when you need that water. So instead of having a surface storage like the beautiful lake you have in your photograph, this would be water stored underground so that it does not evaporate.
Thank you. All right. While we're waiting for any others in the queue, I'll open up to staff if you have anything to say at this time.
I'll just jump into, well, first, good to see you, Don. Thanks. Yeah, I certainly, if something's coming off pejorative, we can look at that. I don't know if, we'll go back through and look at, I'm glad you highlighted some specific examples and we could see if there's a way to address that. But I mean, I think overall, and just a few other conversations too, just I think, again, to note the good work that cities have done and continue to do. We're seeing places where we're having extreme growth and at the same time keeping water water use pretty flat. That's a huge success, and I think that is, does speak to good work. It's probably not everywhere in Colorado, but certainly we have some standout examples of where that's happening. So take your comments to heart. Thank you so much for saying that.
Can I follow up on that?
Sure.
Sure, we don't have anyone in the queue, so go for it.
Awesome. I was worried about the 4 minutes, but I just also want to thank everyone because this is a very well put together plan. You guys have done a lot of work, and I am not trying to come off as saying that you haven't. It's a wonderful plan, and we'll use Engage CWCB to add a few comments in about some of the projects we've done where we think we have exceeded some of the expectations of the plan. So we're going to use that as a sounding board. So thank you for putting together CWCB Engage as well.
Thank you. All right. So again, the queue is open. If you'd like to make a comment or question, please type your name and affiliation in the chat, and we will just hang out until you can do that. And we will keep popping the instructions in the chat as new people join as well, so that they are caught up.
Stacy, just to since Dawn brought it up, and then thank you for doing that. It's always actually really helpful, and I love it when we get some of those kind of specific suggestions. It's pretty helpful to just like going to exactly where somebody saw something, whether that's a typo or an area that they want to make a comment about. Stacy, you had teed me up before to bring this up, and since we've got some time, I'll just say, if you go to Engage CWCB and you click on Read the Water Plan, there's a link for a survey, and you have about kind of 3 options there that you can pick from to make comments. So number 1 is just general comment. By and large, I would say that's the majority of what we get. And when we get those kind of comments, I think our goal is to really roll those up into a way that we can hopefully make some use of that, whether it's to our board or elected officials. We may be able to break that out even kind of regionally and see, where, comments might be coming from. And I think that that's helpful as we're talking to county commissioners and others about what people are seeing of value across the state, but in their region specifically. There is that option to make those specific chapter by chapter suggestions, whether those are edits or comments. And so it kind of walks you through each chapter to make that. It's very helpful for us just to kind of marry up the comment with where to find it, because if we do end up with thousands of comments, that will be a big time saver. And so just, again, appreciate people using Engage to go through that survey. And then the last option is if you are, a group that, has a letter to submit, or you are, want to batch upload some comments that you've got from, stakeholders you deal with, there is a third option there where you can kind of submit just attach a PDF of information you have, again, letter, batch comments. So there's kind of 3 options open to you. And with each of those layers, we kind of ask for more information. We got some feedback at the beginning that sometimes, providing too much, specifically emails or other questions was a little bit of a barrier for comments. So we tried to back off of that. But if you're submitting a letter, we figured you're okay to kind of identify the organization you're coming from. And I think that that's helpful for us on the back end too. So appreciate everybody using that, and just wanted to kind of highlight those opportunities.
Great, thank you, Russ. Looks like we have Katie Gill that would like to ask a question. And Katie, if you could please, when you start, state your affiliation, so we have that on the record. And you have 4 minutes starting now.
Well, I have previously commented as a representative of Safe Bear Creek Lake Park, but right now my question is really just from someone in the small town of Morrison, and really a question about grant funding opportunities. We in Morrison, we're a small town. When we apply for grants, we're usually looking at DOLA. And just since I've been involved in this process a little bit, reading the water plan and commenting a little bit, it strikes me that we've never really thought of the Colorado Water Conservation Board as a place where we could maybe work towards some grants. And we do have a lot of water and wastewater infrastructure. We're such a small town, anybody can be engaged in our town government. It's there's not a lot of layers to it. And so I'm thinking one thing that we need, and I've brought this up with our town board and our mayor, is that we need more water conservation in our comprehensive plan as a municipality. And I know a lot of larger municipalities have already done this, but we haven't done this yet. So we talked about it in a goal setting session last week. And I'm wondering if it's not innovative or creative, but I'm wondering if there's a way in which we could apply for some grant funding to help us with that planning process, just as far as helping our town planner. We have a consultant, we don't have a planning staff, but helping us work with our comprehensive plan to bring some water conservation and water management into it. I mean, we have a water master plan, but it's all infrastructure related. And so that's my first question. Is that something that's even in the realm that we could maybe apply for? And we also, in terms of infrastructure, I think we could do a lot more as a small municipality with our own water utilities around water reuse and water loss reduction. And I saw in the water plan, you know, that there's grant funding for aging infrastructure. We have a lot of aging infrastructure at the intake to our water treatment plant. And we're always going to DOLA and saying, hey, can you help us fund some of these projects? And is there a degree to which we could maybe be going to you guys? So those are my questions.
Thank you. I'll see if staff is available to respond.
I can jump in. Oh, Kevin, you were going to say something too. Sorry.
Jump in. Yeah, this is just right up. Katie, this is what I do. So this is perfect. And yeah, we all those things you mentioned, we can work with you through a grant. Those are not, yeah, those fit in perfectly. And I have a conservation and land use section of our water plan grants fund. So we do a lot of land use planning and water integration in that, as well as we've got a statewide water loss training initiative going on right now that you guys, Morrison, could jump into. It's never too late. We got some really good workshops and training materials and one-on-one consultation. So it's an ongoing thing. We can talk offline and just get you that information. But in addition to that, DOLA they do have grant funding for updating comp plans as well directly. And it's an interesting little nuance now that with passage of House Bill 20-1095 in 2020, you've got to incorporate conservation in that if you want to get funding from them. So that's a perfect segue between their funding and our funding. We could leverage each other's funding. So we can talk offline about specifics and get you where you need to go on that. Our grant funds and our programs can handle what you're all talking about.
Great, well, thank you. Yeah, I will. I'm sure I can find your email and correspond with you directly.
I'll put it in the chat right now.
Great, thank you so much.
And Katie, I'll just add,
you.
you kind of covered, oh. No, I'm off mute. I thought it was on me. I say you covered a kind of a range of things there. So, some of those things for sure other agencies might specialize in, specifically if the infrastructure is more wastewater, water treatment specific. That could even be an avenue through Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, their SRF program. Either way, we work pretty, and Kevin certainly too, like extensively with DOLA, and they're usually pretty good about helping kind of shepherd funding where it needs to go, and they're very aware of all those opportunities too. But yeah, I'm happy. Thanks for jumping in, Kevin. Happy to get you connected there, and hopefully there's some opportunities even to leverage some of those fundings to have a bigger benefit.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, it looks like we have some more people in the queue. So we'll start with Waverly and then go to Lindsay. And if anyone else is interested, just type your name and affiliation in the chat. So we'll get the timer restarted, and Waverly, go ahead.
Great, thank you everyone. My name is Waverly Claw. I'm the Director of Resilient Communities and Watersheds for the Sonoran Institute. And we're very pleased to receive CWCB Colorado Water Grant funding to support our growing Water Smart program, which works with local governments and water providers across Colorado to identify opportunities to reduce water in land use plans and policies. So I just wanted to say thank you for hosting these informative events. The Sonoran Institute will be submitting some formal comments to the communities section of the Colorado Water Plan update. But in general, we just encourage and support and look to CWCB to really be a leader in pushing ambitious targets for water conservation across the state. We do recognize that as communities grow and seek additional water supplies, that has implications for our other economic sectors like agriculture, and having CWCB as a voice to really encourage and also offer resources for municipal water conservation is really, really valuable. And I think I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, next we'll have Lindsay, and we'll restart the timer and go ahead.
Great, thanks so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Rogers. I'm a water policy analyst with Western Resource Advocates, and very much appreciate this opportunity to talk with you all. I wanted to start out by saying that we were really happy to see the Vibrant Communities section of the plan's emphasis on expanding water conservation, integrated water and land use planning, and one water concepts. We think many of the partner actions and the agency actions will help us move the needle when it comes to building communities that are resilient to climate change in the face of population growth, and of course, these unprecedented shortages that we're facing in the Colorado River Basin. So the plan is certainly timely. We would like to see these actions further strengthened or expanded in a few key ways, and similarly, we'll be providing some written comments. But I did want to mention that we'd like to see the plan move away from the idea that population growth must equate to increased water demand and thus new supply and storage. So we've seen that significant investment in water conservation and land use planning not only reduces per capita demand, it also has the potential to reduce overall demand, and thus our reliance on new supply and storage projects. For example, Denver grew by 17% between 2000 and 2015, yet saw their total water use reduction reduced by 28%. The city of Colorado Springs grew 92% in the mid 80s, yet they're using the same amount of water today as they were 40 years ago. And while we've made really strong progress on municipal conservation in Colorado, as Dawn spoke to, we're still a long way away from seeing diminishing returns when it comes to these water conservation solutions. So we'd like to see the plan sort of de-emphasize the need for new supply and storage, and instead further strengthen recognition of the really significant opportunity we have to stretch our existing municipal supplies through conservation, through integrated planning, and through those one water solutions. To that end, we'd like the plan to set measurable objectives for the Vibrant Communities sections, so that the state and local partners can use these to assess progress. The goals could include a 1% per year reduction in per capita use, having 75% of Coloradans living in communities that limit non-essential turf in new development, and having all covered entities conduct water loss auditing annually, which we know CWCB has made some really good progress towards all of those efforts. We were happy to see the plan recognize the significant opportunity available to reduce outdoor water demand by scaling up turf replacement programs and limiting non-essential turf in new development. And to support this opportunity, we really want to ensure that the CWCB's new turf replacement program is fully funded each year to meet what we anticipate will be very strong demand. And we'd also like the plan to recognize the importance of ensuring that our landscape and irrigation professionals have the training and the certification they need to design and install and maintain these new water-wise landscapes. finally, the plan should recognize recreational and environmental amenities as critical economic and social drivers for maintaining vibrant communities. So we'd like that to be included in that sort of one water approach that's being discussed. And a logistical note, I'm watching the timer here. We want to recommend that CWC be set a scheduled time for public comment at the upcoming September board meeting to help people plan and allow more people to participate if they have that time on their calendar ahead of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, at this time, I'll pause and see if staff has anything to say in response to the last couple of comments, and remind everyone, if you'd like to submit a comment, please type your name and affiliation in the chat, or if you're on the phone, you can select *9 on your keypad.
I guess I just will jump in to say, well, first, thanks, both Waverly and Lindsay. Good to see you both. And Waverly, appreciate as well your good work and Kevin's leadership and the work that you guys do together in growing Water Smart. And certainly appreciate the comments there. Lindsay, yeah, I think it's a good comment on the population. And I don't know that it's an insistence, for example, that population is going to increase water use. I mean, there is certainly a connection there, but the stronger correlation and driver is climate change driving up water use, most definitely. But the two strongest signals that come through in the data are those. But you're absolutely right. I think this kind of builds on Don's comments that if we grow the right way and we think about land use codes and we think about densification and we think about reductions in outdoor water use, we can certainly kind of reduce that intensity that we're seeing coupling with population growth.
Thank you, Russ. All right, anyone that's on the line, if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, please type your name and affiliation in the chat. The directions are in the chat, and we'll just hang out until someone decides to make a comment or ask a question. Thanks. I'll also add, Russ has already kind of gone over the next steps after today to go to engagecwcb.org. So if you've basically heard everything we have to say to you all. So if you're don't need to make any comments, you have our permission to leave the meeting early. You don't need to hang out, but we appreciate you hanging out with us as well. So whatever works for you.
Maybe I'll just add on in our last presentation for those that maybe didn't get to listen in, or I think we touched on this at the board meeting too, but and maybe I didn't hit it hard enough in that resilient planning section, but certainly just embracing the fact that as we look at our future water needs, certainly this is clear in our cities, but in all aspects of what we do, that we just need to embrace being increasingly inclusive and working with everyone, recognizing that our solutions need to be shared solutions that we build together, and that really means making a good faith effort to include as many people as we can across the state. So as part of that, part of the reason we're hanging on and just staying through as we wanted to at least honor the fact that some folks may not have been able to make it right on time or might be coming later. So again, as Stacy noted, we'll hang on for a while. You don't need to feel compelled to do that. But you're certainly welcome to join us, and I'm sure we'll have little impromptu updates as this goes along, because it's hard to just listen to the silence sometimes.
So we have a question from Liz D. Liz, do you want to unmute and just go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I did join late, and so I may have missed something that was discussed by this, and it may not have been discussed. I did hear the previous person, the tail end of her discussion, talking about not finding new water sources, but I guess basically trying to limit use of water. And my thing is, there's just a story about Aurora limiting turf grass planting. And is there a plan? Is there anything in the plan? Is there anything the state's considering where that will be something as a state we will be limiting? So, you can't plant Kentucky bluegrass in new builds of any sort, commercial or residential. You'll have a requirement to build a certain, to plant a certain amount of, native / low water plants on your building site, et cetera.
Liz, before I turn that over to Russ to respond, can you state your last name and your affiliation, please?
And I'm sorry, last name is Decker, D as in David, ECKER, and I did not hear the second part.
Your affiliation, if you have one.
I do not have an affiliation. I am an interested citizen.
Perfect. All right, I'll turn it over to staff if they can respond to your question.
So Liz, well, first of all, thanks for joining us. I'm glad you can make it, and it's always good to hear new voices in these conversations too, as well as of course all of our friends that have been joining us. But I will say, one of the things you might have not caught if you came in late is, one of the things that we kind of have to balance is the fact that we are calling attention to these issues. So the ones like the one you talked about, like we really clearly call for a need to look at transformative landscape change, but also have to wrestle with what we could do as an agency. We're not a regulatory agency. We really try to look through the lens of what we as an agency can do. And I can't require anybody to reduce their turf. But we do, I think, talk about the need to grow more wisely with a huge emphasis on outdoor water use and how we're going to really focus on transformative landscape change, which I would say in short is we know it's going to be, potentially up to 5 degrees warmer by 2050, even if it's 1 degree warmer. That is more evaporative water per drop of water we're putting out. It creates more strain on the system. Even just the increase that we've seen already. We can't grow the next million people the way we grew the last. What that means, I think, for outdoor landscapes is that we have to start building the landscapes of tomorrow today. If we got to kind of think about building that kind of suite of outdoor vegetation, keeping our trees alive, softscapes, thinking about things like land use and integrated planning, thinking about the right type of water at the right time, whether there's reuse opportunities or other things aside from just our high value treated water to be putting outdoor. And that does mean we have to look at non-functional spaces and say, does grass even make sense here? Or does any vegetation in some cases make sense here? At the same time, I think we have to struggle with those bigger issues of heat island effect and recognizing there's equity consideration. So it's all a tangled kind of Gordian knot, if you will, that I think we set the stage for trying to work together to untangle. But we as a policy agency can't require it. So certainly I look at the water plan again as that piece that anybody can kind of call on to say, well, hey, this is the direction that we're going to be going. So when you're working at a local level and things that you're citing like Aurora are, something a local utility or local city and county are working on, those kind of opportunities are the things that anybody can help advocate for. And I do think that there's a lot of room to grow in those spaces, and we're certainly happy to work on kind of leading those efforts, whether that's through initiatives like with the turf bill, give us the opportunity to really kind of pilot and kind of spearhead some of that kind of initial change. But we really need utilities and cities across the state to be taking up that mantle and owning it and finding ways to self-fund those initiatives. So I think you're spot on with what you're asking, and that's kind of how we treated it in the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So reminder, if you just got here, if you'd like to make a comment, you can put your name and affiliation in the chat box or raise your hand if you're on the phone with the *9 function on your keypad. And you'll have 4 minutes to comment and you can get back into the queue. So if you've already commented tonight and you have something else to say, please go ahead and we will let you know when your time's up. All right, it looks like we have a phone question, and you can unmute *6 is how you'll do that, and we're ready for you. And please state your name and affiliation before you start.
Yeah, everybody can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, thank you. Yeah, just a few quick things. Thanks for putting this on. I'm Greg Peterson. I'm with the Colorado Ag Water Alliance. And you know, I've been making my way through the water plan, and I thought this was a really good addition. So great work on that. And I guess I had a question and just wanted a comment. My question is, well, I guess I'll go with the comment first, is when we think about vibrant communities, I think right now, just because it's what I've been dealing with, is I think a lot about Kit Carson County, where here's a place that they're going to be drying up 25,000 acres to meet compact obligations in the next 5 years. And just the effect that is going to have, where I think we talk a lot about avoiding Crowley County, and it's like, is this just going to be another Crowley County? I mean, they already have school 4 days a week, and I don't think we're going to ask Kat and Russ to go and teach school on Fridays or help run the ambulance on Sundays, because they don't have the money to do that once they lose their whole income tax, or their property tax base. But I just think acknowledging that, yeah, this is just so detrimental in so many ways, and that in any way that how to maintain these communities. And just the question I had is, I mean, I understand that, yes, you have cities like Colorado Springs, Denver, and Aurora that have built incredible systems. But I wonder, like, what effort is being made, and I'm not going to name names, but the municipalities that don't, and that don't have a plan. And maybe their plan is when stuff gets real bad, they're going to be at Denver's front door asking for water, or Aurora's front door asking. I mean, what about these smaller communities that need a plan and don't have one?
Thank you, Greg. I will leave it to staff to respond if they have something.
Well, I mean, first of all, again, Greg, good to hear from you. Always good to hear you. Thanks for jumping on. For those that don't know Greg, one thing I really appreciate about Greg and a lot of folks in our ag community is they're generally jumping on, and half the time they're doing that from a field somewhere. I'm not sure if that's the case for Greg today, but I wouldn't be surprised. So appreciate your time, as with all of you. I will say, to me, the question you ask is inherent. It may be in the last question that Liz asked too, is we can't do this alone. I think our CWCB board director, Greg Felt, says, the magic happens at the local level. We need that local initiative. And in this section specifically, we call on all cities and counties to have a comp plan that talks about water and talks about land use, and then goes beyond that to really think about what's the next step there. And I think a thread of what you're talking about is just growth, and growing the right way that protects not just city interest, writ large and what the supply needs are, but also support local agriculture and recognize that, as I know one of our other friends in the ag community would say, Jim Yon would kind of be the first to say, let us be a source to kind of help when you have tough times, when you're in a drought. Think about how we can stand up bigger collaborative water sharing agreements or alternative transfer mechanisms, the way we work with agriculture to potentially fallow in times when the city could use it, and then allow them to grow, to keep ag, to keep jobs, to keep local food in production. And that's critical. And you are absolutely right that ultimately sometimes decisions are being made that have these bigger ripple effects, whether it's within the strict boundaries of a city or outside, that we have to address. So these are all things in our vein that, of what we can do as an agency, that I think we're trying to advance through some of the actions that we've laid out to dig into more, to provide what we clearly heard through stakeholder work, to provide more tools to local stakeholders to make those decisions. And I specifically am thinking about county officials that are, or city officials that haven't made these decisions yet, but are thinking about it, to say there are options here that can keep ag in production, and maybe there's a different way to think about that value outside of the strict purchase price. So we need, and that's why I'm glad when we get new faces on here. Liz, you're still listening out there. It's not just what you can do in the municipal space and thinking about municipal water use from a urban landscape perspective, but also what are those greater impacts, and what do we want to see when we grow? If we want to have local foods at our farmers markets, there's just a bigger conversation. And practically, people like Greg and our director Robert Cicada, they're working with counties and cities often on these discussions. But there are a lot of voices out there that don't get heard or don't make those connections, and we need to. And I think we certainly try to with the water plan, to kind of carve out a pathway for at least elevating those discussions and encouraging.
Thank you, Russ. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm out harvesting onions in the heat at the moment. And yeah, I guess I just wanted to say, to the one woman who's with Morrison, and just I work for ag producers, and we have no staff, we don't have capacity, but the support we get from the CWCB, it's like pouring rocket fuel in our projects. And all of a sudden, projects that you didn't think that a bunch of a dozen ranchers could ever find the time or the money for can happen. And so if we can do it, and I work for a wonderful but stubborn independent group of people, anybody can do it.
Great. Thank you, Greg, and thanks for calling in. We appreciate it. All right. If you just joined us, we are in the public comment portion of our agenda. And if you'd like to make a comment and you are on your computer, you can type your name and affiliation in the chat box. If you're calling in on a phone, you can select *9 and it will raise your hand. And we will just hang out unless Russ or any other staff have anything to say until we get some more comments. And thanks, Katie, for putting that in the chat. She just said thank you. And I just want to extend a thank you to everybody that showed up and made a comment tonight and is here listening. Everybody appreciates it.
And for Liz and anybody that might have joined us a little bit later, again, you can go to engagecwcb.org. And if you click on Read the Water Plan, there's also a survey link there that is available Spanish and English. We have gotten some wonderful, actually, stories, just certainly, and maybe a few comments in Spanish that have come through. But either way, if you have something to share, whether it's a broad high-level comment or a specific edit in a chapter, or if you have a letter from your organization you want to upload, there's options through the survey to kind of take all three pathways with a pretty low lift, especially just on kind of general comments. So I encourage everybody to do that as well, if you do, especially if you have something to extrapolate on. And we're actively taking notes tonight too, and we will kind of fold those into what we heard as well.
Thanks, Russ.
Since we're sitting here with nothing going on, I will just say, as I find myself kind of thinking about comments that we heard and stuff, I hope, and I'm not sure if Dawn is still on, but I hope beyond comments, we would get some of those stories shared of where cities are being innovative, because I think even in Greg's point, not every city maybe is doing, and some, to be totally fair, some cities just may not have the budget or staffing or tax base for that matter to be able to kind of advance things as much as others. And I think that needs to be, something to think about as well. But where there are cities that are showing leadership, I think there are certainly other areas where maybe they do have the wherewithal to do certain things and haven't made those same decisions to be progressive and think about kind of the spectrum of things we've talked here tonight, whether that's non-functional turf, how to protect local ag, how to work with environmental groups. So I do hope that, for those listening, if you've got prime examples, and I know a few of you do, of where cities are really leading, I think, above and beyond comments in the plan, which, I'm happy to think about how we can talk about that message more. But I do think we need some of those best examples that we can also kind of pull out and highlight as we move forward, just like we need them from the ag community and the environmental community. What are the things that are inherently making us more drought resilient, that are shining the light on what we need to be doing? Because often those stories and, knowing that you could call up somebody, whether it's Don or Greg, and ask them how they did it, we've heard feedback that really matters to people. And so I think we're thinking even, post water plan, how do we kind of get those stories out there and help kind of make those connections for people?
And Russ, you said there's a place people can just submit those. Is there like a prompt for that, or is that something as part of the comments for the plan?
Good question. So if you go to Engage CWCB, you have 3 kind of key options right off the bat. So all around the water plan, but you can comment, commit, or share. So the same things I talked about. So we, of course, are getting the most hits on people wanting to make comments. And, we have, though, already started to get a number of share your story pieces, and really heartening. A lot of those are in Spanish and English. So we've gotten several that have come through, and it's really neat. And some of those are just personal stories of, what water means to them, or how to conserve, or what they do to conserve. But what I would also love to see, and really, would put that kind of challenge out there to people, is if you have a really, I hear them all the time. Greg and I talk, and he tells me amazing things he's hearing that ag's doing across the state, or Don talked tonight about really neat things that they're working on and wanting to tell that story. Like, let's get those stories out there too. So if you click on the share button on Engage, you can kind of share your story, and we want to. I think we need to hear those stories and kind of elevate them.
Great, thank you. All right, as a reminder, Kat put that link in the chat if anyone would like to go share a story, or you could tell us one right now. We'd really appreciate hearing it. But if you are still here or new to the conversation, if you want to put your name and affiliation in the chat, if you would like to make a comment, then we can get you going. Otherwise, we're just going to hang out and make sure we're not missing anybody that might need to be here late to make a comment. So we'll see how long we can go in silence before Russ has something else to say to everybody. Good. Thanks, Walter, for your comment in the chat. Thank you for being here.
Stacy, maybe we'll do 15 more minutes since I don't know that we've seen anybody extra join, but we'll go ahead and hang on for that.
Okay, sounds good. So those of you that are still here, we're going to wrap up at 5:45. All right, just a quick check-in with everybody. We're holding the line open until 5:45. If anyone has a comment, you can put your name and affiliation in the chat, and we will open it up to you to ask your question or make a comment. Okay, Ian, go ahead. Welcome.
Hey, thank you guys. Thank you for holding it open for us to come participate after meetings finished up for the day. My name is Ian Roche with Conservation Colorado. Wanted to just jump in and say thank you guys for holding these sessions and keeping these rooms open for the public to come speak as we have time. You know, hearing from the public and all rulemaking spaces is important and should be a priority for boards, commissions, and the state as a whole. Your guys' increased commitment to communities from all 64 counties, especially disproportionately impacted communities, is appreciated and noticed by those of us who engage in the work, as is the translation of the water plan draft into Spanish. One area of frustration I've had, though, is the last board meeting, the July board meeting. We were able to attend and participate because we get paid to do this work and engage on these issues, but we noticed that the members of the public who were, probably deeply cared about water and had signed up to come speak, their names got called, but they weren't able to join and participate because the public comment portion had been moved up by over an hour in the agenda. And I know these meetings are long and that you guys are busy, very busy people and have a lot of work to do, but would really hope to see in the future that, when agencies talk about wanting public participation, moving those opportunities will just deter people from participating in the future. And I think fundamentally you guys believe, and I believe, that public engagement leads to both better outcomes as well as better buy-in from the public on issues that can be complex and difficult, like water policy. So to that end, definitely hope to see in the future, a better adherence to the schedule for members of the public who sign up for public comment, increased ease of, finding and signing up for those public comment opportunities and translation when it's requested, so that every Coloradan can participate in these spaces, both during the comment review and draft process, but throughout the implementation of the water plan at basin roundtables and other spaces. You guys have shown your ability to do it with moving the ag listening session to after harvest or after most of the harvest is finished, and shows you guys your mind's in the right place when it comes to making these spaces more accessible. And we just hope to see the continued work and of that to open it up to even more communities, so that as Coloradans we can engage in this work. But I want to end it with another thank you for this opportunity to speak, all of the work that you guys do and the work on the water plan. I know that the work you do and the positions you're in can be difficult and time consuming. So thank you guys again.
Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Also restoring my faith in keeping these open. Thanks for jumping in and saying something, and appreciate your comments and support. Yeah, it is a good question. I think we did have some hiccups, but just so you know, because I don't think this gets advertised, whenever it is not uncommon in the history of the board. Things get moved, things go faster, things go later. It's just how boards work. I don't think it's even unique to our board. Certainly interim water resource review committee can run noticeably long or sometimes have things that shift up in the agenda. So maybe not always a lot to be done there. It's just the nature of doing business. But when we do have people that have signed up early to make comments, we do make every effort to reach out to them. So we are kind of emailing them on the back end or trying to call them and just letting them know that time's changed. I don't think that ever gets noticed. In some cases, in most cases, I think historically that's always worked. I don't know if in this last time that was the case that we got responses, but hopefully nobody ever feels shut out of comments, and they could always make them. And there's many ways to get in touch with us. But point well taken, and certainly I think we kind of recognized just that last board meeting there was a few hiccups, and we just ended up a lot ahead of schedule, as you noted. So good comments, and thank you again for the kudos. I think we are really trying to put our best foot forward in earnest to just make sure everybody feels heard and has a chance to comment that wants to.
Thanks, Russ. All right, to everybody here, if you would like to make a comment, this is your last 6 minutes to do so, and we'll keep the line open in case we get any other people coming in late. Thank you again for everybody being here. Okay, it's 5:45. You guys good, or do you want to hang out a little bit longer?
I'll just maybe wrap up for anyone or
Okay.
just close out the recording of, well, first of all, just thanks to everybody and to a few people that are still hanging on. And just a reminder to go to Engage CWCB. For anybody still listening, I want to make a comment. We have a few ways you can do that on the survey. And of course, we'll have one more listening session coming up at the end of the month. You know, whether it's board meeting or emails or other ways you want to communicate with us, at the end of the day, whether it's before the water plan's final or after, we're always here to make comments. That's what we do. We work together to kind of make the changes that we need to, and are always open to feedback. So thanks for your time.
All right, thanks everybody. With that, I will close the meeting.